Hello, this is Motor City Spark. This is part one of our 250R CDI and component test. We tested a 250R 400 volt LiPo 4S CDI that outputs 400 volts 80 millijoules every spark. We tested it with a variety of 250R components. The ignition coils we tested were the Honda TRX and CR250. We also tested Nology, Dynamini, an MSD 8232 and Fuel Tech. And these are the primary and secondary resistances. As you can see, the Honda, MSD, and Fuel Tech all have about the same primary resistance. However, the Honda actually has the most primary current, so the Honda coils will actually run hottest on the primary side. The Nology and Dynamini, they have higher primary resistance, so they actually run the least amount of primary current, so they'll run the coolest on the primary side. The MSD and Fuel Tech are about in the middle. We also tested with a variety of plug wires. I'm calling the Honda wire is basically the wire that comes connected to the Honda ignition coils. Now, we did not remove this wire from the ignition coils. We only tested with this wire because we didn't think that people were actually going to remove the wire from the coil. But we did test with a red wire, which is 0 ohms, and you'll see that in a minute. We tested with NGK racing wire, which is also 0 ohms. It's also a stranded wire, and it has a 5K resistor in the plug boot. We tested with the Excel 8.8 millimeter graphite and the MSD 8.5 millimeter helical wound wire and the standard AutoZone replacement plug wire. You know, one thing to note here is that the Excel and MSD, they have significantly different resistances. However, they both do about the same job as reducing noise. We also tested with different plug cap / boots. The normal boot that comes with your Honda coils is the NGK. It's a 0 ohm plug cap. NGK also makes a 5K ohm plug cap. And MSD and Excel are rubber boots, and they don't have any resistance, so they're 0 ohms. The spark plugs we tested with were the Iridiums, the standard BR90G, both 5K ohms, and then the both non-resistor plugs. Now, one thing to note here on these plugs is that the two resistor plugs, the Iridium and the BR90G, they say 5K each, and yes, they're about 5K each, but however, the plugs are different. There's a different electrode material with the Iridiums than the standard plugs, and we can see that in all the scope traces. So even though they say they're a resistor plug, they do not act the same. We can also see a difference in the non-resistor plugs, the solid core and the B90G. Again, there's a difference in the center electrode material that causes a difference in the spark waveform. So now let's take a look at the actual components that we tested. As you can see on the far right over here is the standard TRX coil. Next to it is the CR250. We have the Nology, the Dynamini, the MSD, and the Fuel Tech. And if we look at the plug wires, alright, this black one here, that's the standard Honda wire. As you can see, it's a copper stranded wire. We tested with the red wire, so we could make a comparison with all the other coils, the Nology, Dyna, MSD, and Fuel Tech running a copper stranded wire. So we ran the red wire on those so we could have a good comparison. The NGK racing wire is also a copper stranded wire, but it comes with a 5K ohm resistor in the boot. And this last wire that was stripped down, that's the MSD. And if you scrape off some of that graphite, you can see there's a small spiral copper winding on there, which is the wire. So if we come over here and take a look at the different wires we tested, you can see at the top we have this copper stranded red wire. It has a clear coating on it. Next is the NGK racing wire, which is also copper strand. We have the Excel 8.8 millimeter graphite and the MSD superconductor 8.5 millimeter, and at the bottom is your standard AutoZone automotive replacement wire. Now the Excel and MSD, they both suppress RFI, but they do it differently. The Excel does it by having a much higher resistance, 9.6K. So they limit the rate of current rise through high resistance, so you get less noise. MSD, on the other hand, has a lower resistance, but it's helical wound, so it's actually an inductor choke. So they both work approximately the same. However, the Excel does have a little more spark energy because it doesn't limit current as much as the MSD. But either one are fine. And the bottom one, the AutoZone standard replacement wire, that is just full of noise. It's hard to see the signal from the noise. Even the copper stranded wires are much better than this AutoZone replacement wire. So noise basically is an energy waster, and it makes heat. So do not use a standard automotive plug wire with a CDI. So here we'll take a look at these plug boots. Come out a little bit. So in the background here on the left, that's your standard 0 ohm plug cap that you get with the Honda coils, or your standard Banshee coil. Next to it is the NGK 5K ohm resistor plug cap, and actually some of these coils work better with the 5K ohm plug cap rather than the 0 ohm. So we'll see that in part 2. And here's the NGK racing plug wire. It has a 5K resistor inside that red plug boot there. So now here we'll take a look at our CDI. And this is the CDI we tested. Well, not actually this one, but we tested what you call an open frame, where it's a CDI, but it's not in the plastic box. It's not potted. It's just open. And we had scope probes on the CDI, and we did every combination we possibly could, and there was no effect on the CDI. Whether it's copper stranded wire, 0 ohm plugs, nothing affected the performance of the CDI. So those are the components we tested, and in part 2 we'll talk about some more of the results and recommendations of what to run, what wires, coils, and plugs to run. So see you in part 2.